Hi there, and welcome to my bass documentary. In this short documentary, I'll be talking a little bit about the history of bass, how far it's come from double to electric bass. I'll also be doing an interview with working bassist Tim Hemming. He'll be talking to me a little bit about double bass and electric bass, and it'll be the main sort of part of this documentary. But I'll also be doing a bit of archive stuff and voicing over and giving you some information, hopefully. So without further ado, hopefully you enjoy, and here we go. So, firstly, for a long time, the double bass was an instrument of choice for all bass players. It has a rich history in genres of music ranging from folk to jazz and anything in between. It is thought to have come from the string family originating in the 15th century in Europe. Back then, the double bass would have typically only had about 3 strings, rather than the standard 4 you get today. To learn more about double bass, here is my interview with Tim Hemming and all about his experiences with double bass. So I'm now here with working musician Tim Hemming to talk all about sort of double bass. So first question is why do you enjoy playing double bass?
The reason I got into playing double bass was I was in a band playing guitar, and they had another double bass player, and the band owned the bass, and the other double bass player left, and there were 2 guitarists, and they said to me, "Do you want to switch to double bass? Here, we'll sell you our double bass." So I said yes, because they were quite a busy band, and I was having a lot of work with them, and so that's how I got started on the double bass. So I knew the material, I knew the people, I knew the gig, I knew the show. I just had to learn the instrument. And when this happened, I went home and I used that bass that's behind you, that electric, and I knelt on the floor, and I had it standing up so I could get used to playing like that, because I always used to play electric bass with a plectrum, so I had to start using my fingers. So it was tricky, and then after about 2 weeks the band showed up with the bass, and which had steel strings, as it happens, which are fairly nasty for the style that I play. And and I switched to playing double bass, and within about 2 days we were busking for 6 hours and doing gigs, and I completely shredded my fingers. And I used to carry like some plasters, I've probably still got them in the case, like plaster material, so you'd like tape the fingers up to stop the sort of the blisters and bleeding, and carry on. So that's how I got into the double bass.
That's really cool, actually. What do you enjoy most about the instrument in general?
The instrument in general, well, originally I'm a guitarist, as I might have mentioned, and then I got into playing the electric bass. It's a whole long story which I won't go into there, but basically I got into playing the electric, and then this happened with the double. The role of the bass, it like completely underpins music, and I also play clarinet, so I kind of play solo stuff and rhythm stuff. And the bass is just like the ultimate rhythm instrument, really. Especially playing slap on gut strings, you completely drive the music, hopefully. So it's just that power, like if you miss a note, it's like your heart missing a beat. Yeah. So it's that level of power in the music, so it's quite something.
It's that kind of rhythm behind the whole music, isn't it? Which is just like, it just drives, it gets people moving, yeah.
It so does, you watch the audience, you can just do a couple of notes, in a sound check or noodling or whatever, do a couple of notes and you'll see people start to sort of twitch, like involuntarily. So it has the power to make people move around.
Yeah, oh, that's great, awesome. What kind of music do you typically play on your double bass? And could you tell us a bit about its origins, maybe?
Yeah, I play all sorts, anything I get paid for, really. But I suppose the styles that I mostly play you'd call folk music. That's early jazz, Django Reinhardt sort of era stuff. I play a lot of Celtic music, for Cayleys, that kind of thing. English, Irish, Scottish, French, and American, and then I do quite a lot of East European music, so klezmer, Jewish music from Eastern Europe. All the myriad of Eastern European Bulgarian styles, which are absolutely amazing on the bass. There's some amazing players out there. So that's the kind of music. And the origins, well, who knows? I don't know. But yeah, the origins of folk music are sort of off, lost in time. And I don't know if the folk musicians took the instrument from orchestras or not.
I think it kind of it came into the orchestra in the kind of sort of 1700s is what I've kind of read and what I found on the internet, but I could be a bit wrong about that. But it seems like the kind of origins of like folk music stuff are a bit clouded, aren't they? But it's like it is cool. What kind of gigs do you do with your double bass?
Right. Well, as is traditional in the sort of folk music world, I do a lot of functions, do a lot of weddings and parties, and a lot of musicians really look down on that, but I don't. I mean, I actually love doing functions, and I do other gigs as well. I do festival gigs and pubs and stage gigs and busking and everything. But some of my favourite musicians in the whole world have kind of come up through the wedding scene, like some of the Bulgarian bands. It's just weddings is how they got famous, and now they're sort of world famous for playing weddings almost. So I don't mind at all, and generally, the band get treated very well at these sorts of things. It's not like, you're very rarely, in my experience, treated badly. So, it feels very special to be asked to be at someone's, big day. And 98% of the time that is how it goes. So yeah, do a lot of weddings, a few pubs. I have done a lot of busking, street performance, professionally. A few festival gigs, sort of played at Glastonbury and other festivals, and I don't know, Royal Albert Hall. Technically.
Oh, that's so amazing! I didn't even know that. I was just there recently, but
Well, it was a booking at the Royal Albert Hall, but we weren't playing on the main stage. We were sort of playing in a smaller venue within the Royal Albert Hall. Let's say, not to put too fine a point on it.
That is really cool, though.
I played at the Millennium Dome, Riverside Studios, 100 Club in London, but mostly, weddings and busking and the odd pub. I used to do a lot of pub gigs, but not so much now.
Awesome. Oh, thank you. Do you have any sort of favourite double bass players that you kind of look up to, or maybe have influenced you in some way?
Yes, I tend not to know their names though. I mean, my real stars are the East European double bass players from the gypsy bands, that kind of thing. And I'm afraid I don't know any of their names. I don't think. But the bands, bands like Tarif de Hajdux, who are a Romanian band, they're a very violin-based band. They've got like hordes of violins and a cymbalom, which is like a type of dulcimer. But their double bass player is like completely mental. But it's very like the rockabilly style. So if you look at rockabilly players in America, it's very similar. Gut strings, a lot of slap, as we'll see in a bit. But there are other bass players that I kind of like. I mean, Stanley Clarke is a jazz player.
He is great, actually.
Obviously that really famous jazz bass player, Charles Mingus.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's just millions of really good bass
so
players, but that's not quite the style that I try and play. So I think that and out of the folk players, it's very hard to sort of name somebody as such.
So like, there's a few that you like really think are cool, but it's like it's more like the music in general and like the styles. Okay, yeah, that's awesome. So sort of like I see you have a bow over there. I was just wondering, how do you kind of use it with the double bass? Is there like particular ways of holding it, or is there just like tell us a little bit about it?
Right, bow. Now, the bow is used quite a lot in orchestral bass playing, which I don't do. I'm not classically trained, for the record, in anything. So the bow is used a lot in classical playing. It's used quite a lot in some East European folk musics, like Magyar Nota, which is a type of Hungarian folk music, and they bow all of that. And the guys are awesome. I mean, I've seen a player there who was just brilliant. But I don't use it very much, and so I'm not very good on that. I'm a very basic bow player. So I tend to use it a bit for, I don't know. I mean, you can play rhythmically with it, but it's good for a lot of the slower stuff as well, where you want to kind of make a note sustain. Whereas if you pluck a note, especially with gut strings, you pluck a note and then sound dies away and you've got to do it again. Whereas with the bow, you can sort of do it continuously.
And it's very it brings out the volume a lot, doesn't it? Because like even when you play with your fingers, it is quite loud, like because it's meant to resonate massively. But yeah, I just find like when I've heard people play with a bow, it really just does like get out to the audience, and it's just like it's a great sound.
It makes the note longer. Yeah, I mean, especially with gut strings, which have very little sustain, um, as you'll see when I play. If I'm plucking or pulling the strings, you get a very strong attack. So the front of the note is bang, kick drum sound, hopefully, but it dies away very quickly. Whereas with the bow, yes, you can keep putting the energy into the note, so it goes on for a much longer spell of time.
Awesome. So, sort of using your like hands to play the double bass, are there any sort of interesting techniques that you sort of use? Like sort of, I've heard about slap and that kind of thing. So.
Oh yes. Yeah, I'm not a master, not like the bloke in Tower of the Hydux, but I can demonstrate a couple of things. When you would like me to. I think yeah, I see that there are two main ways of playing with your fingers, and one is kind of like that, as jazzers do, so you're plucking, got your thumb anchored under the side of the fingerboard, and you're plucking like that, and the other is pulling the notes, where you just have your hand around the front, you grab the string and you pull it and let it go, and it goes thwack back on the fingerboard, and you can kind of mix and match the techniques a bit. You can have your thumb anchored and do a bit of slap, but they're the two main ways that I'm aware of generating a note with your fingers is plucking and pulling, I call it.
Okay, so they're the two main ways of playing double bass. What are the sort of pros and cons of playing a fretless instrument, do you think, then?
Right, well, until I played double bass, I'd never played a fretless instrument, and it was, coming from 20 years of playing guitar and quite a few years of fretted bass, it was terrifying. So I sneakily put a couple of dots on the side of my neck in marker pens in there. Now the audience can't see those, so they'll never know. But yeah, they're there for the third fret position, the fifth, the seventh, and then the 10th fret is in line with this. Should be in line with the end of here, and then the octave, the 12th fret, is about 2 inches up from there. So that's how I know where I am. But yeah, in terms of tuning, well. If you're bowing, I find that any problems with tuning, like the strings out of tune or your fingers in the wrong place, is really obvious bowing. If you're plucking, you can be a long way out and people just don't notice, because the pitch with gut strings, the pitch is very undefined. And it is there, but it's just less obvious. And I've played with a band of experienced musicians, and halfway through the song I realised, oh, okay, I'm just playing this a tone out or a semitone out, and no one's noticed, no one said anything. And in a band where the leader would definitely have just turned around and taken my head off if he realised, but he didn't, because it's much more about the rhythm. With gut strings, in the style of music that we were playing. So yeah, tuning, I think when you first get on a fretless instrument, it's a bit scary. And on the fretless bass, as you'll see, there's a way of coping with it, which renders the tuning problem alright, which I don't do on the double. But because the notes are so short, it's much more about the rhythm. It's like a kick drum, so you get this boom, and the note's gone. So whether it was in or out of tune, it's like nobody knows.
Not like a massive amount of sustain then when you're using your fingers.
No, so that's why if you're bowing, it's much more critical, and I have to really work at that.
Okay, that's really cool actually. It's interesting to hear the kind of difference between coming from a fretted bass to a fretless, because it is so hard trying to get the notes. You really have to listen. But
and of course, I mean the obvious thing is coming from a fretted instrument, a fretted bass, say to this, is when you're playing a fretted bass, you put your finger behind the fret, so in the gap between two frets. Whereas you're playing a fretless instrument, you've got to put it where the fret would be. So that's a slight positional difference.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of change, isn't there? But I imagine you get used to it. But yeah, it's just initially going there must be quite a daunting task. So since the double bass has been quite prominent in a lot of different genres, such as sort of folk and jazz and also classical, what would you say sort of sets it apart? Maybe theory-wise, how it changes the way you would play the double bass. I mean, obviously, if you go to classical, you might be bowing, obviously, because it's part of an orchestra and stuff. But I suppose what would you say is the biggest differences when you're playing double bass for different genres?
Well, I think people approach the instrument very much in their own way. Not classical players, because there's a very much a standard, and I think jazz there's probably quite a standard way of doing it as well. Um, I've seen some amazing jazz players, but in terms of folk, it's kind of, you can kind of do what you want with it really. So I just approach the various types of music in my own way, and I tend to play very very simply. I don't. Somebody gives me a bass solo, it's like, okay, and I know what to do in my head, because I play jazz on the guitar, but it's like on the bass, I'm very comfortable just being the driving rhythm, and a lot of the bass playing I do is not with a drummer, so because of the slap, it's like you're doing bass and drums all in one. So yeah. So and I like creating that groove, so I'm really happy. Just nailing the rhythm, being the drum machine effectively a lot of the time. In the Eastern European stuff, you tend to kind of be a bit wilder. You're still doing the rhythm, but it's a lot of double and triple slap, and then a lot of runs as well. So it's very percussive. But you're still doing the rhythm, and so that I tend to approach all music like that, because that's my kind of style. But or I'll try and do what I'm told to do. So bowing might work better.
So it's sort of like it's very individual, isn't it? Like there is the set things for different genres, sort of like the way they play the music in sort of different time signatures, I suppose. But it's like you approach it very much in your own individual way.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that the bass, you generally, in folk music, you've got to nail the on beat. If you're not doing that, either it's great because it's some really progressive music where everyone knows where the beats are and you can solo a bit. If you're playing something for dancing, then pretty much you've got to nail the 1 and the 3, in the bar.
Right, so is it okay if you play a bit for us then?
Yeah, sure, yeah, I'll do my best.
So, around the 1920s, we started getting electric bass prototypes such as Lloyd Lars' first attempt, which looked a little like this. This bass was the first to utilise electric pickups, which was quite a bit of a breakthrough in those times. Unfortunately, the instrument didn't really take off, as sometimes it would pop and crackle and generally cause a bit of a nuisance. Also, there was no amps at the time that could cope with the low frequency, so it was extremely hard to use in a sort of gig setting, so people mainly still used the double bass at that point. Then in the 1930s, Paul Tuckmar Jr. designed what is thought to be the first proper electric bass. This bass is known as the Serenader bass. It was also fretted, which was a very new concept back then. Then after this comes the classic that Leo Fender made, the classic P bass in 1951. This consisted of a slab body with a 20-fret bolt-on maple neck. Leo also made an amp that could cope with the low frequencies, so people would be able to use it in an actual gig setting. And this type of bass has been the foundation from where almost all basses have kind of sprung from today.
Okay, so moving on to electric bass now. I see you've brought your a bass that you've made yourself. So could you maybe start off by talking to us a little bit about what it's made of and all that kind of good stuff?
Yes, that's correct. I did make this. It's my second instrument, and I made a guitar, and then I decided to make a bass for my sins about 20 years ago when I was playing a lot of bass. And in fact, I've played not much since then, so I haven't given it a lot of use. But I built a fretless because it was a bit unusual, and I had one which I sold to Andrew actually, who was teaching your brother, which was really nice, and he's got a good bass set. But I decided to make a fretless and have 6 strings for the range and a double octave neck, so you've got 2 octaves up to here, and just for the fun of making it really. And I had some bits of wood lying around, So yeah, that's the design, and I just picked a shape. You know, it's a bit like there's a PV bass, I believe, which is a bit like that. And I had my brother used to live in New Guinea, and he did a bits of guitar building, so he brought a load of tropical hardwood back, you know, for guitars and things. So the way it's made, it's a traditional construction, which is the neck and the body are all one piece of wood, or you know, it's a laminate. It's not a bolt-on neck, which is quite common.
Yeah, you glue the sides on, don't you?
Yeah. So what I've done here is, because it's extra long scale, it's 6 strings. There's a high tension. It's got a big truss rod in it. I mean, I made the truss rod, but it's got a really big, oversized truss rod, because there's a lot of tension there. Big fat B string. So the central piece is maple. They're very hard wood. You know, all sort of the fenders and things like that are the next. Yeah. So that's a piece of maple. It's nice. It's can be a little bit tricky to work if you sort of you know, the grain can kind of go a bit this way and a bit that way, and if you sort of, you can like rip lumps out of it, or you know, get the plane stuck in it either way. So you do have to be a bit careful. But it's, you know, when it's finished, it's like steel. It's great. On the sides, there's a double row of mahogany or mahogany type wood, off an old wardrobe, I think it was. Wardrobe side. So that's what the 2 strips down the side are. So that's your central section. The fingerboard, so regular maple, a regular ebony. You know, you can see there's some creamy bits in it. Probably can't see in the camera, but it's like little brown bits. You know, and a classical maker would have dyed those black because it wouldn't look right. And I thought they looked really nice, so I've left them. So there's a few little creamy bits. That inlay is a piece of ebony. The nut is a piece of ebony. And then this cap here is a piece of ebony as well. Now the body, as you can see, it's a laminate, so it's 3 layers. These 2 are both mahogany type woods, so they're kind of porous, tropical hardwood, different colours. Don't know what it is. It was just some stuff lying around. So that's what those 2. The top, it's very hard, dense tropical hardwood called Quila. Pretty sure it's Quila. I'm not getting it mixed up with something else. And it's like slate, so the bass actually weighs a ton. But you know, I could make it lighter, or I could just man up and play it. So we'll sit down and play it. It's a little bit, slightly neck heavy, but not too bad. So that's what it's made of. The pickups, they're Kent Armstrong cheap ones off the peg, which actually he assured me they would cope with the string spacing, but they don't quite, the 2. So at some point I'm going to have to put on some slightly longer pickups to get the 2 outer strings. But hey, right, I made the bridge out of stainless steel, and the saddles and things, it's sort of machined out of stainless. It's very simple, sort of Fender style bridge. And the electrics is so complicated I can't remember. But there's a sort of volume and a tone, and there's switches in and out of the pickups. I think there's a phase reverse switch for the humbucker, and there's a pan pot to pan between the pickups as well, which for some reason it's sort of
Interesting configuration there.
Yeah, well, yeah, you just have to remember which one does what. Turn them all on 10 and forget about it.
It's all good.
So yeah, and there's the dot markers, which are little bits, I think they actually might be bone or ivory from a very old knitting needle that I found in a charity shop. And then that's a piece of plastic from a modern plastic knitting needle. But if you ever come to do this, go to a charity shop and get knitting needles, because the plastic and the bone ones you can saw up into these dot markers. You know, all the dot markers that go on the front, so you don't have to buy the expensive stuff from the guitar shop. The strings, because it's extra long scale, they're made by Newtone Strings, who do custom made strings as well as regular stuff. They're stainless steel, and because it's an extra long scale, normal strings don't fit, so I had to get these made. And they're stainless. Well, they're supposed to be stainless. You can see they've gone a little bit rusty there, because I haven't played it as much as I should have done. But yeah, that's the bass, and it's very heavy, but it sort of generally does seem to work.
Yeah, it seems really cool actually, just like making your own bass and like all the different components. Really interesting stuff actually. So since you play double bass and stuff, and you've trying to get used to it, and you've you've become quite adept and like a really good player. Would you sort of say it's easy to transfer those sort of skills over to playing an electric bass like the one you've created?
Well, I started on electric and then went to double bass. well, I started on the fretted electric and went to double bass. Did I? I can't remember if I had the fretless first or the double first.
Okay.
It was such a long time ago, and I am getting quite old now, so I just don't remember. But no, because the double I play with fingers, and this is a plectrum, so I play this like I'd play a guitar.
Yeah.
And actually, playing the double bass was a sort of life-changing thing. It was so different just playing with my fingers.
Yeah.
That was the main thing, and not having frets. Yeah, it was really out there. So.
Yeah, that's really cool actually. So, since you play both kinds of basses, double and electric, what would you say are the pros and cons of both? Is like any problems you've run into with specific ones, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a couple of things. When you're playing, especially with the plectrum, when you're playing an electric instrument, you can fly around like Hendrix.
Yeah.
You can play really fast. Jaco Pastorius. You can go mental. Now on the double bass, I think if you're really good, you can. But as a beginner or playing it in a rhythmic way, you just can't play that kind of speed. So in order to create a groove on the double bass, you've got to pick out the beats that you want to emphasize and ignore the sort of really fast flashy stuff. So it really, if you've got to play a Latin rhythm or something, it really makes you think about where you're putting those beats, and you can do it. You can do really powerful rhythmic stuff on the bass very simply, especially with a bit of slap, because you're putting in more beats then. But it really makes you distill the elements of the music that kind of need that note, because you can't put them all in. Whereas on an electric bass, and a good player would probably do that on a steel strung double bass, but I can't. So you just, you're thinking of the boom, 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 boom,
You got that kind of rhythm going on,
boom, ch, boom, boom, ch, or something like that. You just have to simplify what you're doing and make it work for the music, and it's generally possible to do that. But it's interesting that it makes you pull the music apart to see what it really needs.
Awesome, so thanks for answering my questions of the interview. Hopefully we can hear a bit of you playing your electric bass.
Hi there, hopefully you've learned something new about bass, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.